Please welcome Vice President, Foundational Data Services, AWS, Mai-Lan Tomsen Bukovec.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Storage Leadership Session. My name is Mai-Lan Tomsen Bukovec. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Vice President of AWS Foundational Data Services, which includes S3, Kinesis Streaming, and CloudWatch, among other services, and they are the core building blocks that almost every application today and in the future uses, regardless of what type of compute and database your application needs. I'm here to talk about AWS storage innovation at exabyte scale. And I'm going to be co-presenting with Andy Warfield, who will come on stage a little bit later. He is a distinguished engineer on storage, and he's going to walk through how we pull together different AWS services across storage and analytics to go from a data set to a data lake, the most predominant data pattern powering so many business decisions today. I have worked in AWS for over 12 years, and I couldn't think about a more exciting time for a data-driven business. The world is generating data at an unprecedented rate, and IDC forecasts that just in 2022, the amount of data created and replicated all over the world is 101 zettabytes. To give you a sense of what that means, there are 1 trillion gigabytes in a single zettabyte. So 101 zettabytes is roughly 101 trillion gigabytes, and that is in a single year. The data is coming from an incredible variety of sources, ranging from applications to phones to cars, and it powers the applications that we build in every industry all over the world. So now, Adam, in his keynote, he called this a data explosion. But I wonder if we can call it a data explosion when we're talking about this type of growth every year. So I think of it as the new normal. And it's on us as business and technology leaders to figure out how to harness all of that data. Now, we know that data powers decision-making, and with the growth of all these sources, we're able to store that data cost-effectively in AWS storage and use it to power our decisions of today and tomorrow. This is a graph from a recent machine learning survey that looks at how machine learning systems are working with more complex and larger sets of data. Now, the study itself was super interesting, but here's the really important takeaway. The storage data set driving machine learning models is increasing at a huge rate. Now, in this study, researchers looked at the number of data parameters as a way of looking at how the complexity of machine learning systems are evolving over time. And what they find is that it's crazy how fast these systems are growing in size of data. Over the past 2 decades, we've seen systems grow from about 100,000 parameters to systems that have over 10 trillion parameters. That's 100 million time increase to over the past 20 years to the storage data set that's driving machine learning. And in the case of machine learning, we are seeing this growth because it's the complex models. It's the models built on these enormous data sets that lead to step function change in systems. And whether that's autonomous car, driving, if it's text and image generation, or it's supported diagnostics and radiology, these systems are grounding the term big data in a very concrete way. Now, if you're talking about 101 trillion gigabytes of storage that the world is generating in a year, you know how important your storage decision is. There's really only one place to put all that data. It's AWS. There's no other cloud provider that has over 16 years of proven track record of the highest operational standards for durability and availability, security, elastic scale. And we have the continuous, relentless innovation that is going into your storage so you can reduce costs, move fast, and get more value out of the data that you store. Now, we have a lot of data services up there. There are so many options for you for your storage choice, but I'm going to call out an intangible for why there is only one place to put your storage. Amazon operates by leadership principles. It's how leaders lead. It's how it helps us guide our behavior and our actions every single day. And there's one leadership principle that is absolutely running true in all the teams that are building the storage that you use today. And it's called highest standards. The name of the leadership principle is insist on highest standards. And there's a phrase in there. And it says that people sometimes think that our standards are unreasonably high. And yet we insist on them. And we come in every day to build the storage services that you see here with that focus and cultural dedication to what some might think as unreasonably high standards. And that is true for all of your storage teams. And it is an intangible, it's hard to put your finger on, but it's deep within the culture of everybody who is working on your storage today. We're here for our customers when it matters the most. Like many of our customers, United moved to AWS a few years ago. But boy, elasticity became very important during the pandemic. So if you flash back a little bit in time, in 2019, United and United Express operated more than 1.7 million flights, carrying more than 162 million customers. But then in 2020, the world changed for travel. And in fact, in one day in 2020, United had fewer passengers in the air than pilots. So, in 2020, it was obviously incredibly important for United to be able to scale down usage on AWS to save on costs during this huge travel shift. And they were able to do it in a way that would have never been possible with an on-premises data center. Like many of our customers, United moved to the cloud to get the cost efficiency. And what they found is with AWS, they had the agility to launch new applications faster than they had ever done before. So when travel started to pick up, customers were getting out there, they're taking a few planes. Boy, travel was complicated. And what United was able to do is in April 2021, they were able to very quickly, in a matter of months, launch the United Travel Ready Center. And this solution made it so much easier for United passengers to navigate a bewildering set of new rules around vaccinations and documentation that your destination needed for you to disembark and actually go to the place that you were trying to go to. And that made the travel experience so much easier to navigate in the real world. And today, United customers, I'm sure many of you are out there in the audience, I myself am one, and we still use that Travel Ready Center. Because it was a piece of innovation that United pivoted and created quickly that helped the whole world navigate a new world of travel when it needed to, and then going forward. I know many people come to reInvent to hear about the exciting new releases all across AWS. But I also know that many of you are here to learn from others who have gone before. In today's session, I'll be doing both. I'll share what's new, And then I'm going to walk through 3 themes that we've been seeing over and over again for our customers. And those customers might be exabyte scale, like Pinterest, or they might be much smaller. Like, you might not be exabyte scale today. Many of our customers are, but there are remarkable similarities in how customers at any scale effectively operate and grow their applications with their storage. And those are things that you can do today, no matter how much storage you have. So we've taken our observations across so many customers, and we've broken them down into 3 themes: design for agility, dynamically managing your growth, and plan for the unexpected. Let's start with designing for agility. Now, there are 3 parts for designing for agility. The first one comes down to choice. As Adam talked about, you want to make a smart choice. And you're already there because you're basing your applications on AWS storage services. And the agility you get is that when we improve our application or our services, your applications automatically get better. They get more cost effective. They have higher performance. And often you don't have to do any work, and the improvement comes at no extra cost. I'll talk about a few of those today. The second thing is that AWS, we're constantly pushing ourselves to simplify your developer experience. And agility also comes by having fast-moving applications, and complexity is an enemy of that. And so our goal is to constantly improve and simplify how our services work so you can simplify your applications. And that helps your overall velocity of everything you're trying to build. The third aspect of designing for agility is taking advantage of our huge Amazon partner network and our AWS Marketplace to extend your application in ways that you might not want to invest your core competencies on. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Speed matters in today's business world. And when you use AWS, you're improving your agility by harnessing our innovation for your application. The second trend that we see across our customers is that they dynamically manage their growth. It doesn't just happen. It is dynamically managed. They make decisions so that they grow intentionally at the best cost efficiency and according to whatever their custom business rules are. Now, I'm going to be talking about very specific practices that many of our customers here use to dynamically, intentionally manage their storage, no matter how much they have. And of course, if there's one lesson that the world has learned in the past few years, it's plan for the unexpected. And as painful as that can sometimes be, push your organization to imagine and plan for every last case and bake that into your application architectures. So the first dimension of design for agility is betting on the AWS services that are constantly evolving and improving. If you think back into the old world of on-premises data centers, if you want to speed up the storage for your application, you have to migrate to a new product. And if you're migrating to a new product, you're going to whoever runs your IT organization or your teams that are doing the qualification of new products, and you're getting in line. You're asking for prioritization and a roadmap booking, and that is not agility. If you consider something so fundamental as performance, when you are using AWS storage services, you're just going to have them improve year over year. And our AWS file services are a great example. File data is prolific, and it's growing, like all data, exponentially. And our file services, they really focus on understanding what storage admins, application admins, and builders want, which kind of means operating traditional NAS workloads, running compute-intensive workloads like HPC, and setting up large-scale sharing for cloud-native applications and workflows. And when our file services team innovate, again, with that insist on highest standards focus that we all have across storage, they are constantly raising the bar on performance and scale and lowering the cost of storing that data. Here's an example. We launched Amazon FSx as a set of fully managed storage services. So you could move existing storage services to AWS, taking advantage of managed deployments of the world's most popular file systems, from NetApp ONTAP to Windows File Server to ZFS Linux-based file servers, and all as instantly provisioned AWS fully managed services. I am excited to announce that yesterday, we doubled the maximum throughput and IOPS performance on Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP and Amazon FSx for OpenZFS. That means, as of yesterday, when you create new file systems on these services, you just get those improvements immediately. Contrast that to the old world of trying to upgrade to a new product to get an improvement on performance like this. Now, as you know, FSx isn't our only file offering at AWS. Customers who are building file-based cloud applications often use EFS. And as an example, Regeneron, which is an international biotech and pharmaceutical company, used EFS for their researchers to access and share file data securely so that they could go up and down with their management of their storage. And so this week, we announced EFS Elastic Throughput, a new EFS throughput mode that's designed to automatically deliver the throughput performance that your application needs. Now, when you turn on Elastic Throughput on EFS, you don't need to specify or provision throughput performance. Elastic Throughput helps these unpredictable workloads that have spiky performance requirements and are really hard to forecast, like machine learning inference. In addition to Elastic Throughput, this week, I'm happy to announce that EFS also lowered latencies by up to 60%, so you can improve your application's performance. For example, latencies for reading data with EFS are now as low as 250 microseconds. As I mentioned before, the AWS FSx family has been super popular for customers who are looking to migrate their primary enterprise storage arrays to the cloud while maintaining that same administrative and user experience today. We also have services like AWS Data Sync and Storage Gateway to help you migrate the data into S3 buckets. But we have heard from some customers that they want to get started faster with their existing set of storage on premises. They have told us that the storage that they have on premises sometimes runs into these temporary peaks, and they want to burst into the cloud. And that's why we launched the Amazon File Cache back in September, a couple months ago, for cloud bursting. The File Cache is a fully managed high-speed distributed cache, and it's designed to deliver sub-millisecond latencies and hundreds of gigabytes per second of throughput to your application. The whole goal of File Cache is that it makes all the data of your enterprise filer appear immediately as if that filer was already in the cloud, and it efficiently presents it as a high-performance in-cloud cache. That makes it really easy to get started with AWS Analytics without any changes to your existing on-premises storage. As one example, KJAL, which is a neuroscience company that is using Amazon File Cache today to accelerate the research that they're doing on Parkinson's and Alzheimer's diseases. Now, sometimes the innovations that are happening under the hood of your AWS storage service can change how you think about using storage entirely. On November 15th, a couple of weeks ago, we announced a fundamental change to restore speed for two of our popular Glacier Archive storage classes. We increased the storage restore throughput by 10 times when retrieving large volumes of archive data from S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval and S3 Glacier Deep Archive. And what that did is it reduced the data retrieval completion time by up to 90%. This improvement applies automatically to any standard and bulk retrieval of Amazon S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval and Amazon S3 Deep Archive, and it is available at no extra cost. That's agility. When your underlying AWS services, they're evolving at this rate, and they're doing step function change, like reducing your restore throughput on cold archive, which is the cheapest storage that you have. Deep archive is less than 1/10 of a cent per gigabyte per month, and now it's up to 90% faster to retrieve from. Your storage services are evolving so rapidly that your application can benefit from them with often no extra cost and no change, and that means you as an application developer can increase your velocity by focusing on taking advantage of the changes in your underlying storage services. Think about the options that opens up. Just for this example, when your storage becomes 10 times faster on data retrieval, now you can start thinking about cold storage in a different way. Now, the second aspect of agility is this idea of simplification. You can't have fast-moving applications and teams when you're working on very complex things. And so AWS is constantly pushing how customers develop using our services. And one example of this is S3 access points. We introduced S3 access points a couple years ago. And the whole idea was to take a shared data set in an S3 bucket and have the ability to have very specific access points that govern requests and access for that shared data set. And this week, I am pleased to announce that our S3 customers have even more fine-grained control for access points. We have cross-account support so that you can delegate access to data sets for access points owned by other AWS accounts. And this is really important because as our customers are working more with other applications and other partners, they need to have more control of this cross-account support in all of our AWS services, and now you have it for access points. It was our first or our top request from customers who are adopting it. That focus of simplicity is not just on making it easier to do things like access points across account. It also extends to our other services across AWS. And so I'm excited to announce that this week we have Amazon Redshift streaming ingestion support. Before, when you were loading data from AWS streaming services like Kinesis Data Services, data streams, or AWS's fully managed Apache Kafka service Msk into a Redshift cluster, you had to stage data into S3 first and then copy the data from S3 into Redshift. With Redshift streaming ingestion, now you have data that goes directly into a Redshift cluster with high performance, high throughput, and low latency in seconds, in near real time. And that type of performance means that you can build BI dashboards with real-time insights, and you can take action on that data without doing extra steps. This is a great example of the focus that we have in AWS on the different dimensions of agility. Not just working on agility you get from your applications with our storage services, but how we can make it easier to use our different AWS services together for your data needs. Now, the third and final form of agility comes from the ability to extend your application and your business logic using our Amazon Partner Network and solutions in the AWS Marketplace. I wanted to give you an example that was near and dear to my heart. I work closely with Thorn, which developed a solution called Safer. It's the first holistic solution that lets companies detect, remove, and report child sexual abuse material at scale. Now, Safer is in use today by AWS customers like SmugMug, who wanted a turnkey solution to keep their platform safe and free of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. Rather than build a solution of their own, AWS customers can go to the AWS Marketplace today and use Safer to make sure that their storage doesn't contain any CSAM. Safer works too. Since its launch in 2019, Safer has matched more than 1 million image and video files of CSAM for reporting and removal. Now, Thorne's ultimate goal is to eliminate CSAM from the web entirely, and I can't think of too many missions that are more important than that. And so if you're looking for a solution to go and help you protect and keep your storage safe from this type of material, or you're looking for any other type of extension for your application, the AWS Marketplace is an amazing way to get that agility without you distracting from the core focus of the application that you're building. So we've talked about these 3 different dimensions of designing for agility. We talked about how you're betting on our services, our storage services innovation. We talked about simplifying application development so that we can take some of the heavy lifting or just extra work away from you so you can focus on the things that matter to your application the most. And we talked about leveraging the power of our partner network and our marketplace. Now, I would like to introduce Andy Warfield, who is a distinguished engineer at Amazon and a good friend of mine, to walk us through how to leverage some of the services that I've talked about in a data lake. Andy?
Thanks, Mai-Lan. I'm Andy Warfield. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm an engineer on the S3 team. And today, I'm going to continue the conversation that Mai-Lan's been having about agility and take a few minutes to talk about data lakes as a design pattern that we see customers using to achieve agility in their systems. And so let's start with the term data lakes because we're going to lead with that. Data lakes are actually, as a term, about 10 years old. And they were introduced to draw contrast with the term data warehouses. So they were originally a term that was actually about moving fast and building with agility. The thinking at the time, a decade ago, was that data warehouses were really, really awesome and a super exciting idea. But to take advantage of one, you had to do a whole bunch of upfront work. You had to define a schema. You had to do ETL to move your data into the warehouse. And then you had to build applications on top of whatever query APIs sat on top of the warehouse. And so it was a project to start to get value and insight from your data. The proposal with data lakes was to work with data in source formats, right? Instead of worrying about query APIs and things like that, we would just worry about collecting our data in a place that we could use it in a shared way and decouple the teams and the applications that we were building on top of that data from the data itself. And so this is exactly what we see. This decoupling has been really, really profound. And over the past decade of the term data lakes being used, we've seen customers start from often a single analytical question to build out applications that have tens or hundreds of teams, tens or hundreds of services running on top of a common set of data. Amazon S3 is the foundation for hundreds of thousands of data lakes. Customers love S3 for data lakes for 2 reasons. First of all, as storage, S3 is bedrock. S3 is durable, it's elastic, it's cost-effective, but most importantly, S3 saves people from having to think about planning and provisioning storage up front. You just worry about getting your data into S3 as a data lake, and then you move on to working on how you can work with it. And working with that data is the second thing that is really, really compelling about S3 and the customers tell us that they love. S3's APIs are simple. Having been on the S3 team for 5 years now, I can tell you that we work really hard on keeping these APIs simple, and some of the most tense and engaged design discussions we've had have been on extending the APIs to make sure that we keep their integrity. S3, the programmatic aspect of S3 is a thing that's really enabled it over its lifetime to grow integrations with all sorts of other tools and services. AWS services like EMR and Athena use it. but so do third-party applications for data lakes. Things like Spark and Apache Hadoop connect directly to S3. S3 today houses 280 trillion objects, serves 100 million requests per second, and just functions differently as a result of its scale. One of the most compelling things in terms of using S3 for analytics workloads is that having worked prior to S3 on enterprise storage, you typically build a storage system around the data that your organization needs to store and the workloads that you're working with. In that scale, you're limited in terms of the ceiling on performance that you can get to the system that you've built for your data. But storage workloads are really, really bursty, and a lot of the time they're idle. And so by aggregating all of these multi-tenant workloads into the system as huge as S3, when we burst demand, an individual customer is able to draw on a huge, huge amount of aggregate performance to meet their query needs. So the really cool thing about the data lake pattern on top of S3 is that it's pragmatic and iterative. Like I said, we'll often start with a single question. What I'd like to show you today is a fictitious customer example that I'm going to walk through a journey of adopting a data lake on top of an existing workload. I've talked to hundreds of customers that have adopted data lakes and used this as a pattern on top of S3. And so this is kind of an amalgam of their experiences. Now, I'm going to walk you through a demo of a few tools that this customer takes as they move through their journey onto building a data lake. But I don't really want you to focus on the tools. The tools I show you are tools that we've had in AWS for years and that many of you have probably used. What I'd really like to walk through is the impact that small, piecewise decisions have and the agility that we get in building these applications on top of shared data. So the customer that I'm going to describe to you is medium-sized, not-for-profit. I'm going to use an open source data set that's called CharityML that's been used for a whole bunch of really interesting research on donations and donor data in not-for-profits. The data set that we use is probably a lot like a lot of existing enterprise, early databases or effective databases that you've seen in the past. It's a collection of Excel spreadsheets. Right? The team's working on top of a collection of Excel spreadsheets. They started that way years ago. The spreadsheets have gotten really, really big. We do donation tracking with them. We generate financial reports. We generate receipts. We run campaigns on top of it, and it works just great. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to step toward taking advantage of all the tools in the cloud to draw insights from that data, but we don't want to disrupt that perfectly functional workflow and disrupt the team as a barrier to being able to get some insights. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move the data into S3, and then we're going to start asking questions from it, and then we're going to move to drawing experiences from it that we can use to influence our organization. So let's start with ingestion. The spreadsheets are stored on an enterprise filer. So we're going to start by building a bit of local automation to convert those to CSVs, because that's what I'm going to use for the remaining bits of the example. And then we're going to set up AWS Data Sync. Data Sync is a serverless facility that will take the data, it will continuously pull it off of our enterprise filer and pull it into an S3 bucket. As the data changes in the enterprise, Data Sync will continue to keep the data fresh in S3. Now, Data Sync is only one tool that we can use to do this. There are loads and loads of different approaches. There are things like File Gateway, Firehose, even SFTP, the SFTP transport protocol. Who would have thunk that it was as popular as it is? But SFTP turns out to be used really, really broadly in both scientific applications and finance. And so the core thing here is to meet your application on its own terms, right? And find the most frictionless way to move that data into S3. The second thing that we will do once the data is in our bucket is we'll use AWS Glue, and we'll set up a Glue crawler to go and build a schema against the data that's there. The Glue catalog will represent the metadata of the data that I've moved into the S3 data lake. And this is really important for two reasons, and they're both really forward-looking. The first one is, as I bring in other types of data, and I use other sources of data, Glue will give me a consistent and uniform index across all of those data types. The second thing is that Glue will help me if I need to move the data across representations and targets. So as I work with the data over time, Glue will make it possible, if I need to transform it, to do that really, really effortlessly. And so what we've done so far is started with that data. We've moved through ingestion and cataloging. The semantic layer in Glue is not actually obscuring my data. The data is still there in its source format, and I can use any tools that I want to bring to bear on that. This is about a day's work for one person in this case. So now let's start asking questions. The first thing we're going to do to ask questions is use AWS Athena. Athena is a console-based SQL query language that lets us just ask SQL queries against our data. You can think of it as a one-on-one conversation with the data. And what we'll do in this case is start to ask questions to just understand the financial state of the business and start to understand how much donations we're pulling in month on month, how we're doing relative to other years. This is not something that is limited to this specific customer example at all. In fact, has anyone in the audience ever used SQL to go and do debugging on their application's log files? Have you ever had the use case where you've had to go and figure out a performance problem or something and get at your data as logs, and it just made sense to move it into MySQL or something like that? We see that pattern all the time today. Customers moving application logs into Parquet and then using Athena to go and do that kind of debugging against the data. So with Athena, we've learned about the data. We have some initial statistics and metrics that we want to draw on to help the team understand how things are moving. We now want to move from this one-on-one conversation to an ongoing conversation with the team using these metrics. And for this, we're going to switch to use QuickSight. QuickSight lets us take each of those SQL queries, attach them to widgets, and build a dashboard that lets us visualize the state of the business. This is really, really compelling because now I've moved from a conversation between myself as a developer and the data and a conversation between the data and the broader team. By doing this, we build some charts that show how our month-on-month work has gone, some drill downs to show the geographic and some of the backgrounds of our customers that are using the data, and a KPI around how well we're doing. And we see right away that we're up on last year by about $600,000 in terms of donations. But as we look more closely, we realize that our donations are down quite significantly over the past 2 months. And so that's an insight that we might want to dig into. Now, when we work with metrics in AWS, which we do internally on our teams like crazy, we're very, very obsessive about metrics. A thing that we notice is it's never enough to produce metrics. We can't expect a team to go to this dashboard and look at it. QuickSight offers a facility to schedule mailouts of the dashboard so that we can share a snapshot of it with the team. But I would go further than this if I was building the system. What we do internally, and we do this for things like performance data in S3, is instead of mass mailing everybody in the organization the dashboard, we mail it to one person. And we have that one person reflect on the data once a week and write a couple of bullets at the top of it that summarize and call out the most important parts, and then they mail it to the team. And now you've gone from an automated piece of mailing about metrics to a really personal engagement with the data, right? And something that the team is engaged to draw their attention to the most important thing and learn from. Okay, so this is still our dashboard. We've put it in front of the team. Are there any engineers in the room? Engineers in the room. So have you ever had the experience of producing something that the team that you're working for absolutely loves? Right? They love this. And so is the response typically, thank you very much for your work, we're done. Right? No good deed goes unpunished. And so that's what happens here. We put up this dashboard and we have some metrics and we're driving some success, but the team gets excited about it. And they go, what can we do in terms of using this data to shape our donation and campaign decisions in the next year? And this is an example of how we can pivot and be really agile. We move from here to take advantage of Sagemaker. We decide to fund a bit of time and a small team to start doing things that are more in the future than the present and look predictively at what we can do with this data to inform our decisions for the next year. Now, the team doesn't have a lot of experience with machine learning. So what we're going to do is use Sagemaker Autopilot, which lets us just work through the console, train some example models, and get to testing predictive ideas about hypotheses and how they're going to likely influence donations over time. As we work with this, maybe we hire a data scientist, and the data scientist does have experience with machine learning, and Sagemaker will let them move into a notebook engagement and use richer and more powerful tools. As we go on with this, this turns into a flywheel of us being able to run experiments and learn and grow forward with things. Now remember, the Excel workflows are all exactly as they were at the beginning of the day. We can come back and visit those if we decide to move forward in a different direction with them whenever we want, but we haven't disrupted them. Instead, we've moved piecewise, question by question, into some really, really influential values. And this is exactly what I've seen across hundreds of customers at various scales and with all sorts of data in AWS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. It's awesome to see all of that coming together. Now, I won't lie. Perhaps that scenario that Andy said, which is your engineers have just rolled something out, and everyone's all excited. Does it stop there? No. You always get asked for something else. And Andy and I might have been in that position once or twice. So no matter what size storage you have, I'm going to talk about the second theme, which is how you still dynamically manage their growth. That storage is growth. And that means being intentional about cost, about your data policies, how you think about reliability and backup. But a lot of our customers really get anchored on managing their cost. Finra, the regulatory body of the US Securities Exchange, did exactly that. Over a 3-year period ending in January 2022, Finra increased their storage usage by several-fold. Now, when they had that storage increase, they did not increase their unit cost by the same amount. In fact, during that same period of rapid storage growth, they actually dropped their storage unit cost by 50%. They halved it. And they did it by being incredibly intentional about their growth. They doubled down on the use of S3 intelligent tiering with its automated discounting based on access, and they heavily used Glacier Instant Retrieval, which is archive storage with millisecond access. Another example is one that Adam called out, which is the Wall Street Journal that highlighted the journey that Airbnb went through to focus on cost efficiency. Now, when they started this effort, they started it because they were on a path to IPO. And they wanted to get real serious about making sure that their efficiencies were in place. And they were able to save $63.5 million in 2020 alone. And they used similar strategies. They used the cheapest storage they could, as much as they could, which is Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive, and they replaced these really expensive homegrown backup systems with AWS Backup. Now, I will also call out that what Airbnb did is they dedicated a small team, 7 people, to do nothing but focus on cloud efficiencies. And if I look across all of our different customers, particularly ones that have hundreds of petabytes, if not exabytes, they tend to do this. They have a set of people, and it doesn't have to be a big team, but they have a set of people, a small team, that can drive an incredibly big impact, like Airbnb did. So in 2020, they cut costs by 27% compared to the year prior. They lowered the cost of revenue by 26%. And in September of this year, Airbnb posted its most profitable quarter to date, with $2.88 billion in revenue. That's pretty amazing, and it's also pretty intentional. So let's pull out a few of those very concrete tactics that storage customers of any size can use. First, any data that you have that has an unknown access pattern, you should think about putting into some form of intelligent tiering. In S3, it's called S3 intelligent tiering. So if you are looking for a way to get a very quick cost efficiency win, look at what you have in S3 standard storage and ask yourself, can that go into intelligent tiering? It's what Finra did, it's what Airbnb did, it's what so many of our customers have done to get a quick win for your application. The same concept of intelligent tiering applies to other storage services too. So EFS has an intelligent tiering where you can save up to 72%. On FSx ONTAP, with auto tiering, you can save up to 65%, moving from SSD to fully elastic storage. So look for the opportunity to leverage the intelligent tiering in your AWS service. Other services sometimes will offer other ways to take advantage of cost savings, like dedupe and compression for the FSx family of services. And think about that idea of dedicating a small team. And honestly, sometimes it's a couple people. The Airbnb one that got all of those benefits that you saw about, they were a dedicated team of 7 people. Now, they might not have done all the work, but they did all the research. They did all the analysis. And they came up with programs and strategies that Airbnb was able to roll out across the whole company to get to their savings at scale. And every customer can do that. Another common practice that just about everybody uses to save on cost is to use the most cost-effective storage class. Now, if you've talked to me in any meeting, and I may have said it once or twice before, your storage is always colder than you think. Okay? So I don't know how many times you might have been in a room talking to a set of application developers who were convinced they absolutely needed the hottest storage that you had. But often that is not necessarily true. And the cost savings that you get by going to some of these colder storage classes is pretty significant. And so what we recommend is that try it. Try intelligent tiering. Try Glacier Instant Retrieval, which gives you the archival storage price with millisecond access. And to help you understand your patterns of access and what storage you should be using, we launched S3 Storage Lens a few years ago to give you company-wide organization visibility into your storage and how it's growing. And so Storage Lens gives you metrics, it gives you recommendation, it gives you reports. And available now, this week, you have 34 new metrics in Storage Lens, which means we've more than doubled the size of the metrics that are now at your fingertips to understand how your storage is evolving. I will say as well that almost all of our large S3 customers are using S3 Storage Lens because it's such an easy way to understand your data estate. Now, speaking of data estates, in Adam's keynote, he announced Amazon Data Zone, a new data management service that helps you catalog and discover and share and govern data across your whole organization. Now, it's coming soon, and I am very excited about it because it helps you be intentional about your storage growth. As your data grows, Data Zone makes it easier for your data admins to manage your data access and how your consumers can go and find and use your data. It also makes it easier to collaborate with other users across your organization because you have the right controls in place and you can be intentional about your access to your data set. Now, when you're being intentional about your growth, don't forget to use existing tools like Compute Optimizer. Last year, EBS launched EBS optimization recommendations in Compute Optimizer, and I really encourage you to use this ongoing. It's free. It's a free service, and it's been helping EBS customers optimize for performance and cost in all their volumes by recommending volume type, volume size, and performance levels. If you haven't checked it out, you should. Because as you can see, your recommendations are laid out super clearly in the Compute Optimizer console, and you can get a view if your volumes are optimized or not. Now, one thing that Compute Optimizer and I will tell you, if you are still using GP2 instead of GP3, which launched 2 years ago, you are missing an opportunity to save 20% on your EBS volumes while getting far more flexibility in throughput and IOPS. There is no reason not to switch over to GP3, and it's something that both Compute Optimizer and I will consistently tell you. EBS Snapshots is another place we put a ton of effort into. Now, we launched Snapshots years ago to help protect from volume failovers. And so people use it for backups of EBS volumes. They use it for storing AMIs and boot images. And they use it as a primitive for backup and migration for non-EBS storage sources using EBS direct APIs. And as we evolve our snapshot capabilities, we're just going to continue to focus on the areas of improving our security and data protection, reducing cost, and simplifying and automating our workflows for integration with enterprise environments. Now, last year, if you remember, we launched EBS Snapshot Archive, so you can save 75% on snapshot storage costs. And many of our EBS customers use that today. So again, if you aren't taking advantage of this capability, you should really look at it. So for example, Johnson & Johnson archived over 100,000 snapshots to meet their compliance regulations. They have to keep their snapshots around for more than 20 years. That can get awful expensive. So J&J used EBS Snapshots Archive to migrate 120,000 of those snapshots in 2 months. And they integrated it into their e-discovery workflow to automate the whole snapshot archive recovery. And with this change, they archived 3 petabytes of snapshot data, and they're saving over $1 million a year on their snapshots. And again, something that everybody in this room listening to this talk can do today. Many of our EBS customers also use data lifecycle. And in September, a little earlier this year, we added support in Data Lifecycle Manager to archive EBS snapshots, okay? And so if you had the custom scripts that were doing this in the past, you can now set up policy-driven archives based on retention needs, just like you create and delete snapshots on a schedule. So not only do you have the capability to leverage that 75% savings on your snapshots, now you can automate it as well. And this is what many of our largest customers are doing today. When we talk about using our lowest cost storage, that applies to any of our data services. And here we have Amazon Msk, which is our managed streaming for Apache Kafka. A lot of our customers are using it. And just in October, we introduced tiered storage. And the idea behind tiered storage is you can now separate the growth of your compute and your storage, and you can really lower your total cost of ownership. This was an incredibly popular feature, and when we launched it, people started using it right away because, again, people want to intentionally manage the growth of their storage, and whether that storage is for streams or if it's for data at rest, it is all the same idea of being dynamic about managing your growth. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk to you about today is planning for the unexpected. Now, I don't think this one needs a lot of motivation or explanation, but it's really interesting to see how entrenched a learning this has become for our customers and adopted in their application architectures and their team cultures. Ultimately, planning for the unexpected is about resiliency and flexibility. It's about assuming that surprises are going to happen and making sure that you're doing the upfront work in your applications to prepare for those surprises. Now, as you know, security has been job zero for us. And as you know, in security and planning for the unexpected, kind of starts by having a full view of your security. You're looking at data from different sources and in different locations in order to have a complete understanding of your security. And that's why I'm excited about what Adam was talking about with the Amazon Security Lake. This is an Amazon data lake, and it's assembling source data from all of these different locations using the protocol that we introduced. I believe we have over 50 partners that are, have committed or have adopted this protocol to get this data from different sources. And really, if you think about preparing for the unexpected, step one of that is to pull the data together. And if you're using Amazon Security Lake or you're building your own data lake, those premises start from get your data together, have one holistic view across it, and make sure that you are able to plan for the unexpected by having that holistic view. Now, another way to plan for the unexpected is to think about how you can leverage the 29+ AWS regions that we have out there. Now, years ago, we introduced cross-region replication for Amazon S3. And our customers immediately took advantage of that to automate, through policy, the replication of data from one region to another, or between buckets in a single region. Then, we introduced a multi-region access point. And as I said before, an access point is an abstraction on an S3 bucket that lets you put a unique access policy or more on that single bucket. But it also introduces the ability to have essentially an access point that fronts buckets in different regions. That's what our multi-region access point launch was before. I think it was a year or two ago. What we have announced just this week is the ability to set a failover control for your access point. So when we launched our multi-region access point, the S3 request would be served from the bucket that was geographically closest for the lowest latency. That was good. That was performance. Now what we have is the ability to actually fail over from one region to another. And so what that opens up is the ability to set up an active-passive configuration and initiate a failover to shift their S3 data request traffic to an alternate AWS region within 2 minutes. So you can still use the different building blocks of cross-region replication, and now you have the ability to operate S3 multi-region access points in either an active-active or an active-passive mode because you have the ability to do that failover. So part of the planning for the unexpected also means using pattern matching and machine learning to detect and protect sensitive data. So as you know, there is sensitive data across all kinds of different organizations, and it's in streams, it's in your logs, it's all over the place. And being able to interact with PII data correctly is incredibly important for businesses in so many different industries. So earlier this month, we launched Amazon SNS Message Data Protection. And SNS Message Data Protection, it uses pattern matching and machine learning under the hood to detect and mask or redact PII data within an SNS message payload. Just a couple days ago, we also launched that same capability for your logs, for your CloudWatch logs. So now you can use CloudWatch logs, and you can set up a policy that automatically redacts and masks sensitive log data as part of log ingest, as well as logs in transit. Okay? So both of these new capabilities, where we can automatically detect and then you choose redaction or masking, use the same underlying technologies, but it provides this ability to plan for the unexpected of that data floating around, and you maybe not know it, either in your SNS payload or in a log file. So last year, we launched the recycle bin for EBS snapshots. And what that does is it automatically retains snapshots and OMNIs for a configurable retention period. And what a lot of our customers do is they don't put recycle bin on all their EBS data. They just put recycle bin, they set it up for their most important data so that somebody who's maybe new to the team doesn't go through and accidentally delete an EBS snapshot of a very important thing. But when we rolled that out, we had other customers come back and tell us, well, it's great that we have that, but it still is possible to go and change the rules of your recycle bin. And then that data that you thought was protected was not because somebody came in and made a change. And so as of November 23rd, I'm excited to say that we now have rule lock for recycle bin. It's an extra defense in depth for accidental delete. So you use the recycle bin, and now you can put rule lock, and you can be sure that the data set that you want to keep around isn't going to be accidentally deleted. Now, no conversation about preparing for the unexpected is complete without talking about data protection with AWS Backup. We have been investing heavily in AWS Backup. And today, AWS Backup protects over an exabyte of their application on AWS. And the way we think about AWS Backup is it's data protection. It's really making sure that your most valuable assets are secured and resilient against the unexpected, and whether that's technical faults or human error or ransomware. Protecting your data means that you can be resilient in the face of all manners of events. Now, this week, we announced that we have application-aware support for AWS CloudFormation and infrastructure as a code so that customers can protect and fail over and recover entire applications. And we've also continued expansion of AWS Backup with new database support for Amazon Redshift and a preview of SAP HANA on EC2 to protect your in-memory databases as well. And as we talk about scaling up and rules for handling data, we're also launching the support this week for delegated admin with AWS organizations. And that means your backup and recovery permissions can be granted as personas closer to the workloads by removing the need for member accounts to access management accounts for backup administration. So for many of our customers, that type of rule setting for backups is incredibly important. It's not just important for your business practices. It's critical because compliance is so important to an organization, which is why we launched AWS Backup Audit Manager last year. And so this week, we have announced 3 new compliance capabilities with AWS Backup. First, we have cross-region, cross-account support for AWS Backup Audit Manager. In addition, we now have legal hold support for AWS Backup, which prevents your holds from your data from being deleted. And then finally, we're happy to introduce Cohasset Associate Certification for AWS Backup Vault Lock, which means that you can use it in environments that are subject to SEC 17A4, CFTC, and Finra regulations. This is exactly what our customers have been asking for from AWS Backup, particularly for banks, brokerage firms, and financial institutions. As we all know, data is the foundation for every business decision that we're making, now and in the future. And when we think about how we build our storage services for you, our customers, we're like 100% focused on creating that foundation for your applications and your applications' agility and velocity. And we're doing it with that leadership principle I talked about at the beginning, which is we're insisting on highest standards in everything we do because we know that your data is the bedrock for your application. So I wanted to say, on behalf of our teams that work on storage here in AWS, I wanted to thank you for using our services. We are so impressed and inspired by what you, our customers, are doing every day. And I will tell you, speaking for myself and everybody I work with, we couldn't be more proud to be part of your journey. Thank you, and enjoy reInvent, everyone.